Enterprise Management 360.
Okay, so now I'm speaking to Jeremy from DivvyCloud. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. I think a good jumping off point is if you could obviously give us a bit of background on DivvyCloud and what you guys are offering in the market.
Yeah, so we are a company really focused on helping customers move quickly in the cloud environment, in public cloud environments in particular. And what we offer to them is we offer a continuous security and compliance software appliance that they can use to keep their organization on track and make sure they never have things like data breaches or records accidentally exposed to the public as they move data and workloads into the cloud.
Excellent. So with compliance and everything we're talking about with cloud, we're seeing a lot of advancements happening. Where are you seeing the market kind of shift, and what are the main threats that you're seeing really?
Well, I'd say there's a couple things that we're seeing. First of all, the main threat that we're seeing is actually human error. Cloud environments are very different to traditional data center environments. And I think one of the main things to understand is that you go from an environment where you've got lots of boxes, each fulfilling their own purpose, to an environment that's 100% software-defined end-to-end. And so what that means is that every piece of your cloud environment is ultimately kind of programmed or designed by a human. That's where that human error threat really comes into play. And so I think that's the number one risk that we're seeing. Number two risk that I'd say we're seeing is kind of just lack of awareness, lack of understanding, and maybe the skills gap is kind of a good way of saying that.
Yeah.
And I think what we see from our perspective on the compliance side is that as companies make that shift, compliance becomes an important way for them to measure how good or how poor they're operating as they go into cloud adoption. Of course, the regulated industries, they have their own specific compliance requirements, but what we are seeing emerging kind of across industries are things like Center for Internet Security's kind of foundational benchmarks and baselines as a way to measure any organization's kind of cloud security posture as they move.
Excellent. So from a compliance perspective, how important is it for companies to do regular audits and make sure they are following those procedures?
Yeah, actually it's a great question and I'm glad you asked it. If you think about kind of traditional data center environments, what you would see is that annual audit as it comes up is just this huge pain point and agony for months at a time. Well, because again, the shift is into a software-defined environment, the audit now is something that you can run with software and you can do it continuously. And it's actually much more valuable to the organization to have that running continuously than to go through those periodic processes. If you go through a periodic process, the number of changes that are happening from one quarter to the next, it leaves a huge gap for when you might potentially be vulnerable or exposed in your cloud environment. So it's crucial.
Definitely. And we're near the start of a year at the moment, and it's important to kind of look ahead and see where we're going. So you've mentioned a couple of teething points that companies could be working on. What advice would you give to kind of get that ball rolling here?
Well, so the first piece of advice that I would give to any company is to, if you haven't done this already, go do an assessment against your current state. Again, maybe just choose a kind of more baseline generic standard like the CIS benchmark as a starting point. Take that back to the organization, digest a little bit how you're doing in your cloud environments. Secondarily, digest how you're doing in differentiated environments, production versus non-production, one workload versus another, external facing versus internal facing, etc. Do a little bit of prioritization based off of that. And then this is the crucial point. Once you've gone through that assessment, it's really important to go back to the team and communicate the results of that and educate upstream as far as possible. So if you've got stuff coming into your environments that's misconfigured, go to the developers, go to the infrastructure and the cloud engineers, help them understand the mistakes they've made, why they're mistakes for those particular environments, and how to build a design or a process in place that'll prevent them moving forward.